Welcome, everyone, to this special meeting. It's not actually a roundtable workshop. Today, we're going to have Gary Martin. So with that short announcement, let me turn things over to John.
Thank you, Dave, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Very hot August afternoon here in Massachusetts. Glad everyone could join us. A little light on the attendance today. Looks like 54 or so, but well, not surprising. I guess it's vacation time for many in midsummer, as always. Anyways, Ivan meeting number 39. If you guys can believe that. Well, our little experiment is continuing to be quite a success, I guess. And of course, MR Resources and Q1 Instruments, always happy to bring the Ivan meetings to you, as we have from the very beginning. MR Resources, of course, been around since 1985, and sort of everything NMR, as it were. NMR spectrometers, magnets, consoles, service contracts, quench magnet recovery, moving and relocation, and so forth. And not to mention, of course, always a very broad line of reconditioned NMR spectrometers available. In fact, three pretty special machines on hand as we speak, all Brooker Avance 3 instruments, 600, 700, and even a 950. So please do get in touch with them, and they'd be very glad to help you out. That said, Krish, over to you if you've got a few words on upcoming meetings for us, please.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. We have an interesting set of topics coming down the pike. We have next topic is industrial application of benchtop NMR. The topic was so popular, there is a lot of interest in participation. So we actually made that into a two-part series. The first part will be on September 15th. It will be led by Travis Gregar from 3M. He'll be joined by three panelists, and then that will be followed as a part two. That will be in November. Again, will be led by Travis from 3M, and three other panelists will be joining him. Look forward to the announcement soon in your email. In between September and November, in October, we are going to have Tim Claridge from Oxford talking about NOVA sequences. That's tentatively currently scheduled in October on the 27th of October. And then in December, this will be the last one of the year, will be Murali Nagarajan from Rutgers. He will do an introductory bio-NMR on December 1st. So the details will be posted soon. Some of them are already in our website, and you will see the emails coming down the pike. And John, that's all the announcement that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Krish, and a very good lineup. Clearly, we are continuing with our Ivan Users group well out into the future. That said, Don Bouchard, over to you for a moment or two. If you could give us a few words on Q1 Instruments, please.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Good morning, everyone. Q1 is dedicated to developing new NMR hardware and software to make routine NMR more accessible. Our products include complete systems at 400 megahertz, complete systems up to 600 megahertz with refurbished magnets from MR Resources for a price that will surprise you. We also offer console upgrades up to 600 megahertz in both an economy and a full upgrade, including full automation with our STM probe. We also offer smart tune and match probes for older Brooker and variant systems for improving reliability. Everyone knows that the probe is the key to performance, and our STM probes have a robust hybrid tuning mechanism with faster tuning, unmatched reliability, and improved throughput. Our STM probes have a patented design with tuning that is free from drift and hysteresis, offers excellent signal noise and superior solvent suppression, and is engineered by the renowned Q1 team in Zurich, Switzerland. The probe configurations include a variety of both broadband observe, as well as indirect detection, as well as a dual fluorine detection on both channels. Want to know more about Q1? Inquire at q1instruments.com for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, and very capable lineup of machines. Please do get in touch. And as Don mentioned, I think you'll be quite surprised with the prices. Anyways, Dave, over to you once again. And if you would like to kick things into high gear for us, please.
Okay, let's get started. Our next talk is from Gary Martin, and we in fact don't know what he's talking about, but we're eager to find out.
Well, since you don't know what I'm going to talk about, there's the title. Well, since Dave doesn't know what the hell he's going to talk about, Dave Russell asked me if Buffy knew what he was going to talk about, and I told Dave no, but Yarag does. So anyway, after Yue's really nice scientific talk, I can assure you I am not going to say anything that is scientifically relevant. This is probably the least scientifically relevant talk I've ever given in any scientific form. So with that preamble, well, let's have at it. And I should note here that this is all Krish's fault. You end up being invited to give a talk at a meeting. Somebody has to invite you. In this case, Krish made the fateful telephone call. So what follows is his fault. Now, this is borrowed from Nature. This is not going to be a geeky science talk that'll end up in the pages of some journal. I can absolutely assure you of that. Irreverent? When you're into your second half of a century of doing NMR, you get to be a little irreverent, I guess. Anyway, that's the excuse I'm going to use. So here we go. Acronyms, where do they come from? Some are pretty familiar. COSY, for example, correlated spectroscopy, has been around for a long time. Others like HMBC are a collection of consonants and unpronounceable. Others have somewhat colorful character, like the proton-enhanced nuclear induction of spins experiment. Some others, you have to be very careful of how you pronounce the acronym when you're giving a talk, like FUCOP, which is an old fully coupled C13 detected heteronuclear correlation experiment that nobody probably ever does anymore. Other acronyms have appeared, were kind of humorous at first, like ho-ha-ha, and morphed into something like TOXI, which is a lot less humorous. Some acronyms are literally for the birds. The now extinct dodo bird lives on, courtesy of Bill Reynolds, as an NMR pulse. That's a 0-degree pulse for all protons and a 180 on carbons. And on this theme of some acronyms being for the birds, while I was still at Cougar High, otherwise known as the University of Houston, Bill and I were on the phone one day talking about his latest pulse sequence, which had 3 bird pulses in it. I said, my God, that pulse sequence has a flock of birds in it. The name flock stuck. During my days at Pharmacia, Upjohn, yeah, I worked for that many companies from the same office. This is also back during the Clinton impeachment days. And some of the acronyms that came along during that period of time, Krish had a hand in creating, like impeach NBC. We all know that Bill Clinton got impeached. The acronym stuck. A few others we were playing with at the time that never came to fruition were convict, acquit, and Monica. And, you know, some of those may still be pertinent. Few other acronyms from that time period had the same inspiration. For example, the cigar experiment. And cigar has in the pulse sequence something called a selective tailored accordion F1 refocusing operator. And those of you who remember the Clinton impeachment will remember Kenneth Starr. We originally named that element STARR, and one of the legal minions at Pfizer, which is where I was at the time, said, you can't do that. So we shortened it to star, and it's like, oops, there was one pulse sequence figure that it sort of prevailed in. Let's change gears, and let's change gear. Those of you that know me know that one of my passions is photography. This talk was originally intended as lunchtime entertainment at Ivan Hour, okay? So hence, there is virtually no science in what follows, although there are some analogies to science that I think are kind of humorous. I spent a heck of a lot of time photographing lighthouses in various parts of the world over the years, close to 400 of them over the last 30 to 40 years. A lot of lighthouse photography is sunny Sunday. People go out with a camera on a nice day, you snap a picture with a puffy cloud in the sky. Yeah, it's good. There's an example. That's the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse on the Outer Banks of North Carolina on a nice sunny day. There's nothing wrong with that. Life gets a little more interesting when you play with the light at different times of the day. This is a shot a little before sunrise looking west. So the sun was actually rising behind my back. You've got the garbage in the atmosphere showing nice and pink. The sort of deep, slightly violet purple around the base of the lighthouse is actually the shadow of the Earth on the crap in the atmosphere. And going back to acronyms for a minute, my tripod, if it could talk, would tell you that I'm a PETA. I had it set up in the Atlantic Ocean to get the angle for that last shot. And you guys know what PETA translates to. Lighthouses weren't built for tourist photography. They're purpose-built structures to guide mariners into port at night and nasty weather. Let's explore photographing at the edges of the day. A little after dawn, another shot of Cape Hatteras. Warm light is sunrise. You can see it reflected on the sand. A little after sunset, you get the sweep of the beam of the lighthouse and the Fresnel from the Fresnel lens in the lantern room. This is a shot of the southeast light on Block Island a little before sunrise. This is a shot a little after sunrise from the water below the lighthouse, and that embankment in the center is where the lighthouse used to stand before they moved it back. Otherwise, it would be sitting in the ocean. And this is a teaser for what was to be some of Ron Crouch's astrophotography later in the week during the Ivan Hours. This is an image that was shot in the moonlight hours after sunset on Block Island, and a little blue line is tracing out the Big Dipper. And this is actually a water suppression photography experiment. Those of you who work in water know that you need to do water suppression. For this photographic soiree, after every 2 exposures, I had to clean the heavy dew off the surface of my lens so I could continue to get sharp images. Another shot on Block Island. This is when you really hope there isn't a car coming over the hill. Kneeling in the middle of the road to get the shot with a double yellow line running straight into the lantern room. You sort of do a little hope and pray. Another shot of Block Island. For about a week in the fall, the sunsets on Lake Michigan. This is back when I lived in Kalamazoo, working at the 5 different companies I worked for from the same office there. There's about a week span when the sun sets between the inner and the outer lighthouses on the St. Joseph Pier light. And I've done a hell of a lot of NMR publishing over the years, but I also used to write for Great Laker magazine. And that image on the left obviously ended up as a cover feature for Great Laker one year. It's just a phenomenon known as a sun pillar. Most of the time, ice crystals in the upper atmosphere are like little snowflakes. They scatter the light, you get beautiful color, and life is good. Once in a while, the ice in the upper atmosphere is hexagonal plate crystals. When that happens, the light shining through the atmosphere hits those little plate crystals, and reflects back to wherever you're standing in an apparent beam of light going up into the heavens, hence the name sun pillar. Lasted for about 2 or 3 minutes. And the day this was shot, it was a balmy, for those of you in hot weather right now, 25 below zero. Another shot of the lights at St. Joe. The day that I happened to be photographed, Hurricane Ivan was tearing up the southeast coast. And what you're looking at there in the sky is the outer edge of the cloud bands from Hurricane Ivan. A little later that evening, I got another treat. The crescent moon fell down out of the cloud bank. Usually when you go out to the lake at sunset, there's always somebody out at the end of the pier. This is Grand Haven, Michigan, and that color is not enhanced. This was actually shot on Fuji slide film many years ago. This is Block Island again. This is the northeast light. A little later that same evening. Another view from that same evening. When you plot our 2D spectra, we use a bounding box to surround the contour plot. Occasionally, you can do a little framing in your photography as well. This is standing out at the point at the northeast light on Block Island. A little more framing light work. This is Cape Hatteras again. When we acquire our NMR data, we can't wait to see the result when it pops up on the computer screen. There's some similarities there to photography. This is a shot up in Maine. And when you look at this, it's, everything's sort of drawing your eye toward the lighthouse, which is what I intended when I took the photograph. If you look in the foreground, there's actually a little puddle, and you get to see some interesting nuances. And with a little more processing, otherwise known as the wind stop blowing, you get a really neat reflection. It's, sort of analogous to looking at the details in your 2D spectrum. This is Nubble Head in York, Maine. Another view of Nubble. This was shot at about 4 o'clock in the morning in the light of the full moon right before Christmas one year. In NMR, we use pulse programs all the time to control the spectrometer. Once in a while in photography, you get to do a little pulse programming too. Each lighthouse has a distinctive flash signature, say pulse or series of pulses of light at specific intervals and color that allow mariners to differentiate one lighthouse from another when they can't see it, otherwise known as at night. Big Red, the lighthouse in Holland, Michigan has a flash signature that's a white pulse followed 8 seconds later by a red pulse. What I wanted to do was to take 8 images, 1 second each, back to back to get that. That's what it looks like under both pulse conditions. And here you go on the flash signature. And again, these are 1 second exposures, 1 second apart. So back to back to back. And we think of lighthouses as relatively large structures. This is about 4 o'clock in the morning in what's known as the blue hour, for obvious reason. In NMR, we think of acquisition times for an experiment like adequate or inadequate, which I've spent a lot of time working on, as being a long time. In contrast, we think of exposures in photography as a fraction of a second. How about an acquisition time from inspiration to realization of 5 years? A week in the fall and a week in the spring, the sun rises at an angle where it shines right down the channel and lights up the side of the lighthouse that can reflect on the wet sand if the lake action is just enough to keep the sand wet to carry the reflection. And it took 5 years of going back that week to finally get what I wanted in this photograph. And as I said, well, you think of lighthouses as big, but maybe Big Red isn't quite so big when you compare it to a ship going out back into Lake Michigan. Roberto Gill is fond of telling me that I've published nearly 50 papers over the years using strychnine as a model compound. I can assure you I've photographed Big Red a lot more than 50 times over the years. This is just a collage of some of the images that I've collected along the way over the years, out of probably literally thousands. It was Fresnel. I mentioned that there's a Fresnel lens in the lantern room of a lighthouse. In NMR, what you observe is governed by the probe you've got in your magnet. The lighthouse equivalent is a Fresnel lens in the lantern room. Unfortunately, most people don't get to see those these days. To see a Fresnel lens, you're going to climb stairs, lots of them. This is looking straight up the inside of the lighthouse at Cape May, Michigan. And you can see part of the spiral, and you can see the lights going even further north. They've got strip lighting under each of the stair treads. When you finally get up there, you're in the lantern room. And if you thought your probe was big, how about 8 feet in diameter for the lens in that lighthouse? The other advantage of actually getting up there is you get a hell of a view. Let's switch coasts. I used to spend a lot of time going out to Varian in Palo Alto. And in the mornings before I went into the lab to harass Krish, a lot of mornings I'd drive down to Pigeon Point, a little south of Santa Cruz, to do some photography. This is the Pigeon Point Lighthouse that did survive the San Francisco earthquake. There in the foreground to the left is what's known as Prisoner Rock. When the tide's low, you can walk on out to Prisoner Rock. But if you're not paying attention to the tidal flow, you can end up stuck out there for an entire tide cycle, hence the name Prisoner's Rock. Another view of it. This is a trip up to the lantern room there. And you guessed it, another long climb. One evening in the late fall, Pigeon Point, they light up that big Fresnel lens, and it always attracts a crowd of lighthouse freaks and photographers, me included. And that's what people come for, is to see that thing lighted like that. Another view in the early morning. This is Heceta Head in Oregon. It's also a bed and breakfast. So if you're into such things, make a reservation about 6 months in advance and you can actually stay at the lighthouse. I was joking about Sunny Sunday photography earlier, so I guess I need to put my money where my mouth is on that. So let's talk about Welcome to Maelstrom Monday. If you want to photograph lighthouses in gale conditions, it's nice to know when it's worth driving out to the lake. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric folks, give you a daily wave forecast for the Great Lakes. And the lighthouse at St. Joe is where that arrow is pointing on the left, and the arrow on the right is telling you that that particular day, the waves were up at about 20 feet. And I can assure you that I did not go to work at Pfizer that day. I took a wave day. This is kind of what you get on a day like that. This is not video. This is high-speed still photography at 8 frames a second, strung into a computer loop. Another shot giving you a, same kind of view. Spraying that image from the wave hitting the end of the pier is about somewhere between 1.25 miles wide, to put that into perspective. One of my friends who happens to be an architect calculated that the impact of a wave hitting the end of the lighthouse pier is about 3,000 PSI, which is the same as a compressed gas cylinder we use in the lab. And to give you an idea of force, the top of that lantern room is 67 feet off the surface of Lake Michigan. And that cloud of spray is going up probably the better part of 100 feet. Lifetime of a wave is about 2 seconds. These were shot at 4 frames a second. To give you a feel for what it's like to be out photographing in gale to near hurricane force winds, this next animation was shot in 55 to 60 mile an hour winds with no registration of the images in Photoshop from one frame to the next. The camera was on a tripod with a 40-pound photographic pack hanging off the bottom of the tripod. And I was holding on to the top of the tripod as well, but this is what ends up happening in terms of just the buffeting that you get in those kind of conditions. So needless to say, image stabilization in your fancy camera is not worth beans if you're out in that kind of environment. When you're doing something like this, it's like learning a new NMR experiment. When you figure out what you're doing, the result data always looks a lot better than the first effort. This is a section of another wave breaking at South Haven, where the images were individually stacked on top of one another to take out the buffeting. This is the entire series of images that comprised what was just shot. These were shot at 8 frames a second. Storm and sunset photography? Sure, why not? I've shot probably tens of thousands of wave photographs. This is one of 2 where you can see a little bit of prismatic color in this cloud of spray up around the top of the lighthouse. For whatever reason, angle of the sun was just never right most of the time. Another shot at South Haven. Watch this image. This is the outer light at Grand Haven, Michigan. It's a big wave breaking on the end. I'm going to pull one of those images out of the sequence. There. And if you look at the image right there, sort of eerie, you can almost see a face. Every year at Grand Haven, there are 2 or 3 people swept off the pier who drown in the lake when they try to go out onto these piers in storms like this, which is just suicidal. At any rate, it's, maybe you see it, maybe you don't, but I sort of did. How about Frozen Friday? Once in a while, Lake Michigan would freeze late. When it did, if there was a storm, you'd get some rather bizarre icicles. These are hanging at about a 30-degree angle, frozen solid, due to a 50-degree temperature drop overnight. It was a balmy 35 below zero before the wind chill that day. This is the coldest day I have ever been out with a camera to photograph. With the wind chill, it was a delightful 58 below zero. This is the lighthouses at St. Joe in the wintertime before the lake completely froze. You can see the beach and the pier are well on the way, though. To get out there to actually photograph up close and personal, I was wearing ice climbing crampons that day. The ice I was standing on top of the pier, was 7 feet thick. This is another view. I was standing on an ice dune about 30 feet high. I wanted a sunset shot of the outer light. And to get that, I had to go out to where the arrow's pointing, about a quarter of a mile out onto the surface of Lake Michigan. And yeah, Chris should tell you I am crazy. But as far as I was concerned, it was worth it. That's what I got. It was really eerie out there. It was like being on an alien planet. The only sounds were the winds and the creak and groan of the ice under your feet as waves were causing the ice to go up and down slightly. When you go out there in the wintertime, you'll see gulls circling the outer light all the time. The reason that they're there is they're literally plucking fish out of the lake and eating dinner that the lake serves up for them. I'm going to close this out with a photograph of a lighthouse. It's about as far as you can go south. short of actually going to Antarctica, and I haven't gotten there, at least not yet anyway. The day that I went around Cape Horn, as the captain said, it was a beautiful summer day. 39 degrees, sleet, 70-mile-an-hour winds, and 20-foot seas. That's Cape Horn in the background. Those are what are known as the Cathedral Rocks in the foreground. And that's the lighthouse at Cape Horn. And again, Cape Horn is that big dark mass behind you. Off to the left is what's known as the Wandering Albatross Memorial, which is the memorial dedicated to the lives of the sailors that were lost at Cape Horn. Let's shift gears another time. I've been teaching my graduate NMR courses remotely. Most of us haven't been traveling. I wanted something different to aim a lens at. For a challenge, think about what it would take to capture an insect in flight. That's roughly akin to getting NMR data for a transient reaction species or doing an HSQC spectrum of a 1 microgram sample of a drug metabolite. We all know that you have to learn to do 1D NMR before you go into more dimensions. So doesn't it make sense to photograph insects when they're not moving first? And the answer, of course, is yes. You need a good digital camera. Film's not going to cut it. You need really high ISO settings, tiny f-stops, and really high shutter speeds. For the photo geeks that are listening, ISO of 25,600 or higher, aperture f16 to f32, and a shutter speed of 1/6400th of a second or faster. All of these photographs that you're going to see are handheld. I use a Nikon 80-200 lens with a Canon close-up lens attached to the front so I can focus down to about 12 inches instead of the normal 8 feet. So what's all that get you? Well, there's a shot of a swallowtail. And again, these are all with that insect about 12 inches from the front of the lens of the camera. Close up of his tail. This is a silver spotted skipper. And yeah, he is a hairy little guy. It's an Admiral Fritillary. A monarch. And this is dumb luck. This was an incoming bee and just had to title this, "Hey, are you going to share that flower?" All right, so I promised bugs in flight. Here we go. There's a silver spotted skipper coming in to land. Hummingbird hawk moths, which have a clear wing in their panel, have to be among my favorite insects to photograph. They tend to be a little more predictable in terms of their flight patterns, so it makes them a little easier to capture than something like a monarch or a swallowtail would be. This is a shot of the bug coming straight at the lens, and when Ron Crouch saw this and got the exposure details, his comment was, "My God, that's 125 microsecond pulse." This was shot at 1/8,000th of a second. And even at that, you can see that from the blur of the wings, how fast that little bugger's wings are moving. This is one of those clear wing hummingbird hawk moths caught in flight. And he's getting ready to take off. And you can see here pretty clearly the clear panels in the creature's wings. A 10th of a second later, I was shooting at 10 frames a second. And a tenth of a second after that photograph was taken, I got a picture of the flower. Let's shift gears to my backyard. I only live about 30 miles from New York City, but my home is up on top of what's known as the Watchung Ridge on 2 acres of woods. And the local wildlife are kind enough to occasionally let me photograph them, like the twins last year. That's Mama. These shots, believe it or not, were taken from my living room with a cup of coffee in hand. And it's pretty obvious that that particular fox knew I was up there watching him, because I literally got stared at every morning. And there's nothing like a good scratch in the morning. I'm going to drift a little ways west to what's known as Lockwood Gorge. That's the gorge. It's a nice creek that flows down through it. It's peaceful, quiet, great place to hike along an old railroad grade. And the flowing water in it is a lot of fun to photograph. And that's me when I had a little less gray hair in my head. I'm going to finish with some cosmic storm photography. This is about 2 o'clock in the morning one night with the aurora in the sky in Michigan and the Big Dipper right in the foreground. It's pretty easy to pick out in this image. This was a little earlier that night at St. Joe, looking straight out the pier with a ship coming in. And this is the catwalk going out to the lighthouses at St. Joe's, silhouetted by the aurora in the sky. Thanks for your kind attention. Thanks to John and the folks that brought you Ivan Hours. And as I said, this was intended to be lunch entertainment. And I'm going to make a political statement. Wait for it. Corporate America, I can assure you, never would have allowed me to include that last animation. So in some respects, it's nice to be retired. That's all, folks. Thanks for your attention.
Oh, well, thank you, Gary.
Hi, you're welcome.
Yeah. May I start with a question?
Sure.
Yeah. How in Michigan, where you were photographing the aurora, how often does that circumstance arise?
About, if you're going to have it in a given year, you'll see it 2 or 3, maybe 3 times, and it happens about every second or third year.
Oh,
It usually doesn't get quite that far south.
yeah. How did you end up on it? Did you wait all night for that picture, or?
Was looking at the solar forecast. They were predicting an aurora that night.
Ah.
And I literally went out to the lake at about 10 o'clock that night. And I think I finally got home about 3:30 in the morning.
Wow. Okay. That's what I wondered. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that with photography, it's like doing a long NMR experiment. You learn to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
It's like with the image of the reflection of Big Red on the wet sand. That literally was, from when I've conceived of it to when I finally got what I wanted was 5 years.
Wow.
Amazing photograph.
And Dave Russell just made a comment, Buffy, if only your NMR data looked as wonderful as those photos.
May I ask the question? I'm not in. Who is Buffy? You?
That's me.
Okay.
Dave, those of you who know Dave,
Guys,
Dave
Yes.
is an avid pilot. And when Dave worked with me at, I think it was Pharmacia or Pharmacia and Upjohn, one of those in Michigan, he was reading a book on the Strategic Air Command, or SAC. And the ground crews for SAC referred to B-52s as big, ugly, fat, fill in the F word, hence Buffy.
Okay. Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
I've actually had a badge at Smash on occasion, courtesy of Deneen, that read Buffy.
So it didn't come from slaying all sorts of difficult NMR problems.
Hell no.
your Friday, frozen Friday photograph reminded me of the time when I rushed out of Kalamazoo. When I heard there is a snowstorm coming.
Yeah,
Those are the
you actually got out that day, Krish.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the next day it was snowed out, so
Yeah,
I just got in the last one.
getting snowed in Kalamazoo was not uncommon. The worst snowstorm we had while I lived there started on Friday and quit on Sunday, 72 inches later. So, you know, that's what you call serious snow.
Yeah. We were going to go out for dinner and then I missed out on that.
Yeah. Kalamazoo averaged about 150 inches of snow a year, which is telephone pole height. Anyway, hope you guys
Are there other questions or comments or?
Anecdotes.
I'm just thinking.
We can roast them. We have the podium. We can roast them. Dave.
Which Dave?
I think he's referring to Russell.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing I'll say about Dave is he's got a remarkable ability of assigning funny names to people. I was Big Dave.
Well, you know, when it comes to pulse sequence parameters, Krish is still infamous for Tau.
Yeah. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah, Krish was too lazy to, add anything to it, so he just put Tau a second time.
Uh-oh.
And if you have not been lucky enough to work with people like Buffy and Krish over the years, it has been a great experience. Not always fun, but great.
Hey, I thought it's all fun. Anyway.
I don't know. Krish and I have been having fun together for about 40 years.
Yeah.
Remember that comment of Barry Shapiro's, Krish, when he commented to both of us that why did we bother sending him papers, that we should just trade them back and forth, tell him what the fix was and he'd accept it?
Right. I remember that letter. Yeah, I knew you before I think I came. I knew my wife. So that's scary.
Yeah, you were in the Department of Entomology across the bay when we first met each other.
That's correct.
It's been fun. It's been an interesting journey.
I want to thank you. This is wonderful.
Okay.
I mean, wish we had given you that opportunity there.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I'll leave it back to Dave Rice.
Okay. So if there are no more comments or things to say, then are there any more? Oh, oops, just 1 second. I'll be right back. I always forget. But I have to
Gavel.
conclude our meeting with the nifty Ivan gavel. So I will conclude our meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
See y'all. Thanks.
Next time.